Mingda is still in the game of making great 3D printers, and their latest offering, the Magician X2, is, in my opinion, pretty fantastic, that I only had one small hiccup with as I used it, but we'll get to that later. The Mingda Magician X2 features one-touch bed-level compensation. It has a dual drive gear direct drive extruder, and I cannot tell you how long I have waited to be able to do this in a video. Silent 3D printing. So silent, in fact, that I can actually run it while I'm reviewing it. And this is probably the first 3D printer I've had here that I felt confident enough to do that with. Besides a little bit of fan noise and honestly just a whisper of it, this machine moves and prints about as quietly as I've ever had a 3D printer do before. The previous Mingda 3D printer that I used, I gave to my friend Odd J, and he also said that it was just absolutely silent, but I didn't have hands-on with that one. Well, with this one I had to try it out, and check it out. The Magician X2 ships with one of these 1/4 kilogram spools of filament, and I much appreciate these, way more than those little coils that you get with other 3D printers. This is enough filament that you can do the test prints on the 3D printer, even learn how to do some printing, and then realize, ooh, I need to order some more filament, and still be able to finish with this while it arrives. But on the SD card there was only one test print. A little bunny. Now, this is certainly appropriate for the Magician, but this 3D print is tiny. I probably could have gotten through it with one of the coils, and yet there's no coil. There's plenty of this filament left, and this being the only test print on this 3D printer left me kind of, well, I wasn't exactly wanting for more options. I never really do much of the test printing, so I guess this is appropriate. And it's super cute. I do like the bunny rabbit. The second print that I decided to test on was to take a cube in Cura, stretch it out to be as big as the build area, and squash it down to be only 0.2 millimeters thick, so it prints only one layer. The idea being, if this machine does level the bed well, that this would print perfectly across the entire surface of the bed. Now, admittedly, the first time that I printed this, there was a little bit too much squish on the front lip. But Mingda contacted me and said, hey, we've got an update to the firmware that fixes that. And it was so easy to update the firmware. Just put a file on the SD card, plug it in, turn the machine on, and it did it all by itself. But there was something else weird about this first print. When I peeled it off the bed, it took with it the color off of the build plate. The build plate had this blue print on it, and now all that blue is on my 3D print here. My little plastic piece of paper has all the blue off the build plate. Now, this isn't really a big deal, but it does seem to me a little bit silly to have the print on your build plate just fall off when you print over top of it. And I guess the lesson there is, if you don't need to, don't print over it. Of course, once I did print over it, the second time I printed one of these tests, well, there was nothing for it to pick up. It was all on the first one. So we're clean to go. So maybe you should print one of these first and get the color off the build plate so that your future prints won't have to worry about that. It's silly, and you can still see on the build plate the pattern, the print, the warnings that they wanted you to see on there, so nothing really was lost. It was just one of those silly things. Next, I decided to load up some tri-color filament from my friends at Acity. This filament prints in different colors from different angles, and this one is red, green, and blue, so everything you print looks like it's a Instagram vlogger because of the different colors coming from different sides. Still, I really enjoyed this and decided to test and see how well this machine would print a whole plate full of prints. So I printed out the PrintABlok Skyforce Star Wings set, and you can see how beautiful this piece is as you go around this filament, making it look real good. But more importantly, the mesh bed correcting on the Mingda X2 meant that I could print all of these pieces at once and didn't have to worry about failures. This particular set has the new pilots in it, which I will be releasing those soon, but I'm super excited to have pilots in my PrintABlok sets now. But that's not what we're talking about today. Let's talk about the printer. I was also playing with, at the time, updating my recorder model. This is one of the first models that I made for 3D printing, even before I had a 3D printer, and I decided it was time to update it. And I did my test printing again on the Mingada Magician X2 with the ACD tri-extrusion filament. Now, I want to release these files, but I haven't yet because I realized in my test printing that I made the connectors wrong. They flare out when they should go straight. So I've got to finish redesigning them and testing them. But the Magician X2 did a really good job of allowing me to rapidly and quietly prototype and prototype and prototype as I tried to get this right. Now, one thing that I'm kind of excited for when I'm testing a 3D printer is when it fails. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, the ability to actually correct and clean up the failure is a big part of the longevity of a 3D printer. And with this 3D printer, I did have a fail. The first time I printed this Star Wing, I had a couple of pieces detached from the build plate, wrap themselves around the nozzle, and just make a mess. By the time I caught it, it was a huge blob that I needed to clean up. But it wasn't too difficult to take apart the extruder head, to get it heated up, pull the plastic off, and clean it up. And in the end, I found it actually remarkably easy to use. So again, even in failure, I'm finding this printer really great to use. Now, I mentioned that there was a small hiccup with this 3D printer as I was using it, and it's time to talk about that. When I first got this 3D printer, you couldn't unload the filament. Well, you could, but Mingda really recommended that people just take the filament, cut it off, and feed the next one through, and then purge until it comes out, which is a clumsy solution. Now, I say that they didn't have any way to unload the filament, but that's not entirely true. They had hid the menu to do that in their menu system, and if you knew where to get it, it was a secret for people. Now, at one point they were saying, you could tell this to your viewers, and your viewers, they're smart enough to be able to handle this. But I told them, come on, can we step this up a little bit? A lot of other 3D printers have already solved this problem. You heat up the nozzle, feed it out just a little bit so that everything gets good and soft, and then pull it out quickly and it comes out cleanly. You just need to have a little script when you say unload that it runs and does all of those steps. And to their credit, Mingda actually put that in there. Now, you might need to update the firmware in order to get this on there, but they have assured me that they will make this available to the public. And so now, when you go into the extrude menu, there is an unload there. So big kudos to Mingda for listening and actually doing a little bit of development on their system to make it even better. So now that they've done that, I can't complain that you can't unload filament from this 3D printer. It's complete, it's ready to go, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's priced for beginners, and with it taking care of the leveling for you and having this system that's so easy to use, it really is a beginner-friendly 3D printer. I will say that it might require just a little bit of technical confidence to be able to jump into it, but only the slightest amount. And overall, it just prints for you and makes it so easy to get into. I'm really enjoying the Magician X2, and I think you should check it out as well. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. A big thanks to my friends at ACD for sending me this beautiful filament, and my friends at Mingda for sending me the Magician X2. Hey, remember, you are a child of God and you're special to me, so take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too. Thanks for watching.